he's saying is that you should understand that this is the fight that you now have. If it was child labor laws and industrial revolutions and abuse of human rights there, then that would have been your fight then. If it was slavery and you were with William Wilberforce, you would have had to fight that there. If you were in America and you were in the Civil War, it would have been your duty to take up arms and go and free the slaves. That's what it would be. So at the end of the day, and that's not me saying that we're in that situation right now. You always got to have this disclaimer now because somebody's going to say, he said we should take up arms. It's like, no, that's not what I'm saying about right now. What I think you should do is you should at least pick up books like 1984 and reread them and understand what Orwell was trying to get at. And so we have a quote. We have this dialogue between O'Brien and Winston that gets at why you have to understand that what is going on with the Twitter files is a big deal. And so we're going to bring that quote up real quick and just remind me to get at the idea that Twitter actually matters when we finish this. So this is a torture scene that you're about to read with me. For those who can't see, I have the quotes up. So if you want to read them with me, you got to go to YouTube. But O'Brien smiled faintly. "You're no metaphysician, Winston," he said. He's got a Scottish, I don't know what it is, but we're gonna give it a shot. "Until this moment, you had never considered what is meant by existence." He's got to be evil too, you know. "I will put more precisely. Does the past exist concretely in space? Is there somewhere or other a place, a world of solid objects, where the past is still happening?" "No." "Then where does the past exist, if at all?" "In records. It is written down." "In records and in the mind, in the human memories," says Winston. "In memory. Very well then. We, the party, control all records, and we control all memories. Then we control the past, do we not?" I'm going to stop now because I can't keep going. "But how can you stop people remembering things?" cried Winston, again momentarily forgetting the dial. The dial is torturing Winston in this situation. "It is involuntary. It is outside oneself. How can you control memory? You have not controlled mine." Clearly Winston isn't married to somebody. But anyway, that's a side note. Not a subtle dig at my wife and my memory. But let me just put it this way. Disclaimer. If you want to learn how much you actually don't remember right, get on a podcast and record it and then get into an argument with your wife. Not saying that's happened. But let's just say my memory's not as good as I thought. But neither is my wife's. So, anyway. So we come back. So Winston says, "You haven't controlled my memory." Now, here's the part that people forget about. Because it's gonna get into the 2 + 2 = 4 stuff. And that is the thing that we want to talk about. O'Brien's manner grew stern again. He laid his hand on the dial. And I think he's electrocuted him or something. "On the contrary," he said, "you have not controlled it. That is what has brought you here. You are here because you have failed in humility, in self-discipline. You would not make the act of submission, which is the price of sanity. You preferred to be a lunatic, a minority of one. Only the disciplined mind can see reality, Winston. You believe that reality is something objective, external, existing in its own right. You also believe that the nature of reality is self-evident. When you delude yourself into thinking that you see something, you assume that everyone else sees the same thing as you. But I tell you, Winston, that reality is not external. Reality exists in the human mind and nowhere else. Not in the individual mind, which can make mistakes, and in any case soon perishes. Only in the mind of the party, which is the collective and immortal. Whatever the party holds to be truth is truth. It is impossible to see reality except by looking through the eyes of the party. That is the fact that you have got to relearn, Winston. It needs an act of self-destruction, an effort of the will. You must humble yourself before you can become sane. O'Brien paused for a few moments, as though to allow what he had said to sink in. Do you remember, he went on, writing in your diary, freedom is the freedom to say that 2 + 2 makes 4? Yes, said Winston. So, that whole section there is about O'Brien torturing Winston about whether or not he has the freedom to say the truth. Now, it all begins with the suppression, because if you actually read 1984, you learn about the memory hole, you learn about how they're editing things and burning things, and the news cycle is constantly evolving and changing, and they always disregard the previous news cycle so that the new news cycle can come in. And so what happened with the Twitter files is exactly what's been going on in 1984. One might actually make the case, not that 1984 is coming, but that it's already here. Because the Twitter files show that this is exactly what's happening. And for little people like you and me, it doesn't really affect our day-to-day lives. That's true. But what about the people who exposed it? What about the employees and the government officials who are now very, very angry with Elon Musk? And this gets into why you should care, especially if you're a Christian leader in a church or in an organization or whatever, if you're in a leadership position at all. But specifically for those who believe that Christianity is the way, the truth, and the life. Elon Musk has some pretty sketchy transhumanist agendas. Now, if you want to see somebody run from the church into the transhumanist arms of the big tech companies and Elon Musk and Neuralink and all that stuff, and believe me, I've heard them on these Twitter spaces. They are ready to jump into that Neuralink because they are fawning over this guy. Why? Because he showed the truth. He pulled the mask off while everybody else was saying, you're a conspiracy theorist, you're a crazy person, you're a nut job. And we haven't even seen the COVID files yet that are probably going to be released as well, because we know Twitter suppressed content around COVID also. So, and Alex Berenson's tweet shows that Pfizer was involved in his suppression. So we know that it's got to be in the files somewhere. But what did the country that is a majority Christian, what did all their Christian leaders do, regardless of denomination? What did they all do? The majority of them, and I'm not saying all of them, okay, there's exceptions to everything, but the big names pushed the vaccine. They made people feel foolish for questioning the vaccine. They guilt tripped them. They implied that they might be murderers if they didn't wear masks in their communications. So we know that the truth about a lot of these things was suppressed on social media platforms. And this brings me to the question of, if Twitter doesn't matter, if social media doesn't matter, if it's just a fun little game for you to post your family photos and just kind of have a good, group chats and things like that about whatever you like, then why is it that the government is willing to use it to suppress information? Why is it that TikTok is something that is a national security issue and sends data back to China? Why do these social media apps matter so much to the biggest governments in the world if they're not real life, if they don't really matter? We should probably stop and pause for a second and think, well, if the people who don't want me to speak, if the people who are against freedom, if the party, so to speak, as 1984 rightly describes it, if the party, regardless of whether that's Democrat or GOP, because the party could be either one. Okay, if you read Upton Sinclair, I think it is. It can't happen here.
No,
Lewis Sinclair. It can't happen here. He actually envisions a totalitarian right that comes in and takes over America. That was his premise. So I mean, we know that this can happen, regardless of the party's name. Sinclair Lewis. There you go. So at the end of the day, the party is who we are trying to identify. Who's the one that's grasping for power? Who's the one that the CIA is on the side of, and the FBI and the governments and the military? Who are they on the side of in terms of leadership? Not in terms of individuals, but in terms of their leadership and what they're doing to suppress human rights of freedom of speech. This matters, especially if you actually care about what people believe to be the truth. Because I don't think Elon Musk is, even though he appears to have bought Twitter because the Babylon Bee was put in Twitter jail, I don't think he's a friend of Christianity, given what he's actually trying to do with Neuralink and all this kind of stuff. He just seems to be a very systematic thinker in terms of what fundamental human rights actually are. But if you want to see people gravitate towards what Elon Musk believes, and keep silent on what's going on Twitter and these tech companies. Don't ask the technology people in your churches about what is significant about these social media companies and why they matter so much. Because they do matter. They are the public square. They are to the public square what your iPhone is to your day-to-day life.